After seeing great success in the 2 Limitless qualifiers, let's see how ADP Spiritomb fares in Rebel Clash. Welcome back everyone to more from the Stabilize. I'm Mitch, and today we are going to be taking a look at ADP Spiritomb. It's obviously done exceptionally well in the Limitless qualifiers, and Ross Cawthorne has played it in both of those tournaments, and he's currently the highest ranked player, I believe, in the tournament structure. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this deck changes over the next format, knowing that, of course, we're going to see Dragapult VMAX come into contention. That's weak to dark, so it could potentially be a good thing for Spiritomb, but Spiritomb has low HP, so Dragapult could potentially come out and be victorious over that. What we'll do is we'll take a look at the list that we've made up, and yeah, we'll see whether or not it could potentially be a strong play in the Rebel Clash format. So obviously Spiritomb ADP revolves around those 2 cards. Spiritomb here with Building Spite. We put 1 damage counter onto this Pokemon every turn with this ability, and then Anguish Cry for a Dark means that we can do 10 damage plus 30 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So if there are 5 damage counters, which is the maximum amount of damage that this Pokemon can have on it without being knocked out, that would be 150 plus the 10 is 160 damage. That's pretty reasonable, but then when you consider the fact that we can also utilize Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia to get that Altered Creation GX attack off, we could also add an extra 30 damage onto that total. So now we're doing 190 damage with 5 damage counters, and we're also doing we're also taking an extra prize as well. So now we're doing 190 damage. We can knock out things, well, most GX Pokemon to be fair, and take an extra prize as well. So that's starting to sound very, very dangerous. And then suddenly when you've got things like Hustle Band in play, this Hustle Band card means that when you've got this card attached to a Pokemon with 30 HP or less, which your Spiritomb usually will have, it does 60 more damage. So that means that we're doing 160 base plus 30, 190 plus the Hustle Belt is a grand total of 250 damage, which is a huge amount of damage for a 1 prize Pokemon to be dealing. So that's the basis of the deck. We're going to try and take as many one-shots as possible with those Spiritombs, whilst using ADP as a bit of support as well. The way we're going to try and support the damage counter effect on Spiritomb, obviously we can attach things like Rainbow Energy to increase the amount of damage counters in a turn, but we can also use this Jynx card, which hasn't seen a huge amount of play up until this point, but Ominous Posture means that you can move a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to another. So if, for example, you have 2 Spiritombs on the bench, you can use its ability to get 10 damage onto both, then Jynx can move 1 to another Spiritomb. That's 20 damage counters. That's really strong, especially when you consider the fact that we've got ADP in the deck, as well as 3 copies of Shrine of Punishment. That means that the Shrine ticks on our ADPs are going to be absolutely ripe for Jynx to move them onto a Spiritomb. And when you think about it, if you've got multiple Jynx in play, you've got multiple Spiritomb, Shrine of Punishment, ADP, you can potentially get 5 damage counters appearing out of nowhere on your side of the field before you can get your attack off with Spiritomb, which means that a fresh Spiritomb can realistically come into play and deal upwards of 160 damage without any real problems. So that is the core strategy, and obviously there are going to be some other cards used to support it. Remember, we're playing in a post-Rebel Clash format now, so we've got some extra cards in this list that Ross didn't have in his lists for the Limitless Open. Obviously, for Jirachi, this card is very important. We need to be able to find the right supporters and the right trainers at the right time. So 4 copies of Jirachi is a good option. We also have 1 copy of the Dedenne-GX. Obviously, the ability to draw cards is very strong, and it synergizes nicely with our little, what do we call it, Shrine of Punishment play. We have 1 Phione as a potential Gust option. In having a conversation with Jordan, who played this deck in the second Limitless qualifier to significantly less success than Ross, but still played it. He said that one of the key things for this list is Gust. Being able to get that Gust off regularly is very important, so Phione could potentially be an opportunity to Gust out something without having to use a supporter or any items, so this is a pretty cool option. And then of course we have one copy of the new Eldegoss V, which is going to give ourselves a little bit more flexibility with discarding supporters, and it means that if we've got a boss's orders in the bin, we can just pick it up, use it, and hopefully win the game with them. Those are our Pokemon. We've talked a little bit about some of the items already, but we'll run through them all here. When it comes to Pokemon search, 4 copies of Quick Ball will search out everything in the deck, and 2 copies of Tag Call will also help you search out your ADPs, as well as a bunch of other tag team supporters. Those are the only search cards that we use, because in reality, as long as you've found one ADP and you've found a Spiritomb in the first turn or 2, you should be fine. The ADP is the key, so that you can get that energy attachment. The rest of the Pokemon will either appear naturally as you go through your deck, or you'll be able to search out with one of those remaining search cards. We also have 4 copies of Acrobike in this list to try and accelerate our hand, extend that little bit more. Acrobike essentially lets us look at the top 3 cards of the deck, right? We get the Acrobike, we play that, see the next 2, and pick the best one out of there. So a very, very good way to extend our hand and get that little bit deeper into the deck to find those cards that we need. We also have a very typical 4 count of Switch. Switch is an important card. You're playing a Jirachi engine, it's probably best to put 4 of these in. Although, to be fair, there's less reason to be moving around as much in this deck. You kind of go ADP, then switch into a Spiritomb, and then you should be fine. 4 is there for safety, really. And we also, I've mentioned the 3 Shrine of Punishment, we also play 1 copy of Great Catcher. Again, we're talking about Gust being important. Great Catcher means we can target out something like a Dedenne-GX on the bench. That will be a relatively easy knockout to get, especially since the nice round number that 160 is. 160 is the amount of HP Dedenne has. It's also the amount of damage that Spiritomb caps out at without any modifiers. So we can always just take a free knockout with a Great Catcher. Hopefully we can end the game with it. We could even potentially knock it out with ADP in the active as well. So always worth considering. When it comes to our supporters, we've got a very mixed bag of supporters in this list. We've got 4 Professor's Research, best supporter card that we've got for draw. We've got 2 copies of Marnie as well. It's going to be our only way to disrupt our opponents, so hopefully Marnie is going to be enough. There's been lots of debate about whether Marnie is fair or not. I think it's pretty reasonable. Getting shuffled into 4 can suck, but you know, it's not always the end of the world. We also have a couple of tag team supporters in Cynthia and Caitlin for draw and recursion of supporters if we need them, as well as 1 copy of Guzmahala. Guzmahala is really strong because it can find you that Shrine of Punishment, one of your many special energy, and also one of the quite significant amount of tools that we actually have. I'll talk you through them in just a minute. We also have 3 copies of Boss's Orders. This is the highest amount of Boss's Orders I've played in a deck so far. It's a lot, but like we were talking about, we want to make sure that we get the exact knockout that we need. So if we've got a boss, there we go. That's the exact knockout that we need. We don't want to waste time half hitting with this deck if we can afford not to. When it comes to those Pokemon tools I was talking about, there are quite a few. We've spoken about Hustle Belt already. There's 2 of them in this list. We also have 1 copy of Escape Board. I personally would prefer to see more, but there's got to be cuts made somewhere. You could potentially go down to a 3-2 kind of unit of switching cards if you'd like, switch an Escape Board, but 4-1 is more than reasonable, and you can just chuck this Escape Board onto a Jirachi, and it's likely to stay there considering you've got more useful tools that your opponent might want to get rid of with Tool Scrapper. And the final one is Big Charm. This means that the Pokemon that it's attached to gets an extra 30 HP. This means that a Spiritomb can potentially put 3 more ticks of damage on it, which means it can do 90 extra damage instead of the 60 that it would be doing with the Hustle Belt. So it just gets that little bit extra damage on top of what we've already got, and an extra 30. You never know when that might come up, so always worth considering the Big Charm. It also means you can put it onto something like ADP to potentially save it from getting knocked out, maybe half hit by a VMAX Pokemon, or one shot by something that does 300 damage. That Big Charm will save it. I've mentioned already that there are quite a lot of energy in this deck. We've got 2 special energies. We've got Rainbow Energy, which is very important. We can play that one down, get an extra tick of damage, which is super useful for Spiritomb. And we've got 4 copies of Aurora Energy. This card's really good because not only does it fill the requirements for Spiritomb's attack, it also means that you can attach it to ADP and it will count as either your metal or your water attachment. Very, very useful. We do need to discard a card to use it, but that's okay. It's not a massive deal. Usually we're happy to do that. We also play 1 copy of each of the 2 coloured energy we need in this list to get the GX attack off. We have 1 water and 1 metal. You might ask, why not 1 dark? Well, we can use these rainbow energies and these auroras pretty easily to get those attacks off, but we desperately need to make sure that ADP gets its GX attack off. If we don't GX with ADP, the chances of us winning diminish very quickly. So we want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the best chance to do that. And if we've got metal and water in the deck, if they play down a Viridian Forest, maybe our opponent does, we can search one of those out, and we can obviously just naturally draw into a couple of extra energy to help us find those cards as well. Probably best to use these as well, since we do have things like a Giratina floating around on our opponent's side of the field, which will discard special energy from our active. It means that we can potentially attach a basic so that we don't have that energy removed unnecessarily. So there's the list that we've kind of edited together. There's not too many changes here in reality. It's just a shift in the way that the gusting engine kind of works. In general, the deck is very similar to the way that Ross's was in those first 2 Limitless qualifiers, but it does revolve around this Spiritomb. If we can get it attacking and get it taking knockouts, we should be okay, especially if we manage to play Dragapult, and guess what? I think we might. A bit of gameplay for us with Spiritomb ADP now. Just waiting for the coin flip here. We've won it, so we'll be going first. And this is really important. ADP deck. We want to be manually attaching as early as we can. We've got 2 Auroras in hand and 2 Jynx. It's disappointing, though, we don't have ourselves an ADP here yet. And looks like the top deck hasn't helped us, but hey, at least we're going to be able to play one of these Jynx down. We'll get an Aurora Energy into play, probably onto the Spiritomb. I think we might need to get rid of the Eldegoss with that Aurora Energy though, which is kind of unfortunate. We'll use Building Spite as well because we need to, and then we'll potentially be ready for next turn. It's just unfortunate, of course, that we won't be able to get the attachment on the ADP. We'll just get rid of, I think, probably the Eldegoss. I think the Escape Board is probably more useful here, and that will probably be our turn. I don't think that there's anything else that we realistically need to do here. If we had had an attachment to an ADP, then I would have been super happy, because then we're ready to GX attack next turn. But in this matchup, since we're playing against Dragapult GX, which is what I believe we are going to be seeing here, it's a Psychic deck on the ladder at the moment, so we're very likely to see it. There's a Shrine of Punishment as well, which goes well with Dragapult VMAX. We're likely to not necessarily be punished for having that energy missing on the ADP first turn. So we'll see how we go. There is the confirmation. Yes, it is Dragapult VMAX. They've gotten rid of one of those and a Horror Energy already. Very unfortunate to have to get rid of all of these VMAXs so early. Obviously not having a single basic to attach to is quite disappointing from our opponent, but he does find a Quick Ball, so he's not in a bad spot. As long as he can grab himself an attachment to this Dragapult, he should be fine. But remember, of course, Dragapult has a weakness to Dark, so we're in a good position as well, because we will potentially be able to take some knockouts with this Spiritomb a little bit easier than we might have before. So we've got a second Jirachi here coming down, and then a pass. So this seems fine for us. We're getting very lucky here, having a top deck of Jirachi, which means we've got somewhere to put this one Escape Board. I don't think we're going to attach the Aurora Energy. What we'll do is we'll just Professor's Research away, and look at this. We've actually got ourselves a pretty solid hand here. We'll play the Tag Call, do a bit of thinning. We can play Quick Ball, get rid of one of these ADPs. We only realistically need one. Could potentially grab another Spiritomb. Maybe a Dedenne as well could be useful. Just having a look through here to see what cards we've got in deck. I think Spiritomb is probably the correct answer, although we don't want to commit too heavily to attaching, kind of getting that damage on there just yet, because obviously if we do that and our opponent gets a VMAX next turn, we'll be able to knock out those Spiritombs quite easily. But what we can do is we can get ourselves a big charm onto that Spiritomb so that the Building Spite isn't that big of a deal. And that means that now our Dragapult on the other side of the field won't be able to knock us out. So that's a positive if they do get everything they need. We'll use Building Spite here as well. This is going to mean that Jirachi is now in range of a knockout. We'll put the Rainbow Energy down and then use Ominous Posture. I accidentally click on the active here. That's alright, we've got a second Jynx. We can just move it to the bench. I did a little bit of incorrect maths at the time and thought that I forgot about the base 10. So I was like, oh, we need 3. No, we only need 2. So we'll move that one back onto the Spiritomb on the bench, and we'll just take a knockout here with Anguish Cry, 70 damage, and our first prize. This is very good for us because now we've set ourselves up nicely for a bit of prize mapping. If you're a person who's trying to get into the more competitive side of Pokemon TCG, because our content kind of is falling into that middle ground a little bit between people who are on the way up into the competitive stuff. If you're a person who's new to this kind of stuff, one of the most important things that you can learn about in the Pokemon trading card game is prize mapping and making sure that you're taking prizes efficiently, intelligently, and you're only taking the amount that you have to win the game. And for us, we want to make 3 attacks in this game, preferably. If everything goes perfectly, we can attack 3 times. We've knocked out a Jirachi. We'd love to knock out a Dragapult VMAX. If they put one down, then that would be great. And if they go for just the Dragapult V, then that's also okay. We'll just need to attack an extra time. But at the moment, we're about to take our second prize. We'll go down to 3 prizes left, which means that we are probably going to be in a very good spot to win this game, especially since our opponent has only taken 1 so far. So we've got the Jirachi here. Anyway, we're moved back into the actual gameplay again. We've got the Jirachi here. We're just having a think about, okay, what is the best option here? Do we go with Marnie? Do we go with Acrobike? We've got Cynthia and Caitlin, so Acrobike and Marnie actually draw us the same amount of cards. But the thing with Cynthia Caitlin is if we play that, we potentially get a supporter back for next turn. We've got the research in the discard pile there. So is it worth Marnieing to kind of stop our opponent having that 7-card hand, or do we Acrobike and Sinlin? I think we're going to Acrobike, and it's a good thing we did because we found the Rainbow Energy, which is what we need to attack this turn. We can attach that down to Spiritomb, which is obviously a good attachment for us, and now we can Cynthia Caitlin. We're probably going to get rid of either the Jynx or the Shrine of Punishment here. Either of those not necessarily very useful. And then draw a few cards. Now we get into another Acrobike, so we can play that one. And I think here Phione is going to be the best option for us. It means that if we do have to take 2 knockouts on a Dragapult V, then we'll be able to just gust up something at the end of our last turn and we'll be fine. Just moving some damage counters here onto our active Spiritomb. We need to have the right amount of damage. Now we're doing 4 times 3 is 120, plus 10 is 130, then times 2 because the weakness is 260. That's going to be plenty for us to take that knockout on Dragapult V. And importantly, it means that our opponent's Dragapult V isn't going to be able to knock us out with that first attack. So he will need to either commit an energy to the Dragapult to take the knockout, or evolve into Dragapult VMAX. And if he does the second thing, then we probably just win. We need to find a Pokemon, right? We need to find Spiritomb, but that's okay. If he doesn't do that, and doesn't commit the energy, then he won't be able to knock us out, right? So that's positive. Worst case scenario for us though is we might get reset stamped or Marnied at this point in the game. This is a Marnie coming right now, which is obviously going to be bad. That attachment now is committed to the active, so we're feeling pretty good about that. This is a really good hand to get off of that Marnie as well. And now we're in an interesting spot where we could potentially, if we find another energy, just GX in this guy's face, right? We can just use ADP's GX attack and set it up so that next turn, no matter what we knock out, we're in a really strong position. And to get the water energy off of that Acrobike is actually making me feel like this is the right decision. What we'll do is we'll put this water energy down onto the ADP ready to GX and then probably play either Marnie or Research here. We'll play Marnie to reduce our opponent's hand, to try and grab ourselves some extra cards. Stellar Wish here, we actually find Switch and Boss's Orders. I think Switch is the right call because it means that we can potentially find ourselves that Spiritomb next turn. And now no matter what our opponent does next turn, if they evolve into the Dragapult VMAX, whatever they do, they will not be able to take a knockout on anything on our side of the field unless they have a big turn with Scoop Up Nets. And we will have the Altered Creation GX already off, ready to go for next turn. So we're in a really strong spot. Now, if we knock out this Dragapult V, we're going to win the game. So our opponent could potentially just go into that VMAX, which means it's going to be a little bit more difficult for our Spiritombs to knock it out, but still very possible. And in the end as well, if things do go poorly and we can't find another Spiritomb, then we've got Boss's Orders in hand to potentially gust out something like a Jirachi or something similar to that, and we could maybe take a couple of prizes that way. Now, our opponent's done almost nothing that turn, so we're in a really, really strong spot. We can Stellar Wish. It looks like we could potentially go for a research here, although looking at the amount of energy that we have in the discard and in our hand, we almost have no energy left in the deck, so maybe it's not worth going for the research. We'll just grab this Tag Call, I guess. That could potentially help us. We can grab Guz Mahala, which is maybe going to come up, not sure exactly. And I think at the moment we're probably just looking at taking a knockout with the Boss's Orders on one of these basic Pokemon on the bench. And I think the most important one that we can take a knockout on is probably Zigzagoon, because these VMAX decks at the moment, Dragapult's not playing things like Pokemon Recursion, not playing not playing the Rod, so it's unlikely that our opponent will be able to get it back, and if they can't get it back, then they won't be able to take any prizes next turn, even if they evolve into the VMAX. So this is probably the right thing to do. Just having a bit of a think here about whether the maths is going to work out for me, and I think it is. If everything goes well for our opponent and he attacks for 130, the Shrine will tick twice. I think we're in a position now where if we do just attack, then we will be short. Our opponent will be short by 10 damage in taking this knockout. So that's a pretty big deal. Now, I make a small mistake here. I attach this energy to the Jirachi. I should have attached that to the active, because if I do find Quick Ball and I get 2 of them off the prizes, I want to be able to make sure that I can retreat into a Spiritomb to win the game. And if I had attached that Metal Energy to the active, then there would be almost no way that our opponent could realistically expect to stop me from winning the game next turn. But if he does play down Giratina now and removes one of those special energies, we're going to need to have to dig for that switch card, which could be very difficult considering the hand we've got at the moment. But it's not the end of the world. We've got 1 prize to take and our opponent has to take 4, so we're feeling pretty good. He's gone with the Jet Assault here, so 140 damage. There's the tick for Shrine, we're on 270, so we survive, we keep the energy, and that means now we are going to be more than alright to get as many damage counters onto this Spiritomb as possible and retreat into the active. We can put 1 from the Rainbow, 1 from Building Spite, 2 from Ominous Pressure, and that will be more than enough to take the knockout, and our opponent's seen that and has conceded the game. There it goes, pretty strong. So we can see that Spiritomb still does have what it takes, especially if Dragapult becomes one of the top tier decks, as people are suggesting it might. The more I'm looking at Dragapult, the less I'm excited for it, to be honest, because there's lots of ways that it can be beaten. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that it's a bad deck, but it is definitely beatable, and Spiritomb could be the type of deck that could do it. Obviously, there is that back and forth there. They both seem to counter each other, so we're going to need a little bit more data than what we've done so far, but if you are looking at playing at Limitless 3, then Spiritomb ADP could definitely still be strong in that particular tournament. Now, this list isn't perfect, it's just one we've whipped together to show off what it might look like in Rebel Clash. There will be more lists like this coming up over the next couple of weeks, so that if you're looking to go into that tournament, you could maybe get some ideas from us if you like. I don't know, it's up to you, right? But apart from that, thank you very much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you like the content and you want to see more, then consider subscribing. Click the button that's just about here to do that. Over here are some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, as well as a playlist of more Rebel Clash content on PTCGO. Thank you everyone for coming along. Hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you all next time for more from the Sable Eyes. Bye.